Hello there, my lovelies. This is Brady, and this week I've been into so many things. I've watched so many movies. I have played so many games that I don't want to give you too much preamble. Let's just get right to it. Why don't we? Reviews versus the wild. Alright, first of all, let's go ahead and let's talk about some games. Because, after so much time, a couple of years of not being able to play a PlayStation 5 really ever at all, I've finally been able to play some PS5 games. And so specifically, there are two that I'm going to talk about, and they're both wonderful, they're both delightful, and they're both worth your time. But the first thing that I have to mention is Astro's Playroom. So Astro's Playroom is a pack-in game, meaning that everybody who has a PlayStation 5 has this game already for free, which is outstanding because this game is so different from most PlayStation fare. This is the most Nintendo that Sony has been ever. And by that I mean there's so many just lovingly crafted little details to this. So Astro's Playroom, it's a platformer. And it's a platformer meant to show off all the capabilities of the PlayStation 5 and specifically of the DualShock controller. The DualSense controller, I think is what they call it. And it does so magnificently. You're able to use the little touchpad, you're able to feel on the triggers where you have that haptic feedback where it, gives you a little bit of resistance. You're able to feel how great the rumble is. You're able to use the motion controls, all that jazz. But you have it in this very charming little package where you play as this cute little robot in this platformer, and everything that you do in this game feels great. It looks amazing, and it all really just flows together so well. This is a great game. And one of my favorite things about it is it's so bite-sized. I beat this in one night, and I enjoyed every second of it. It was so delightful to just jump into a game, not have to worry about, okay, how many hours of bad dialogue am I going to run into? What am I really getting myself into here? Instead, you just have this delightful, fun, cute experience from beginning to end. And that beginning to end is a few hours. It's perfectly paced. It's so much fun. And if you have a PlayStation 5, there is literally no reason to not play this because you have it. You have it. It's a pack-in. You get it for free. So just play it. Astro's Playroom is, it's so good. Which leads me to my other big PlayStation 5 experience that I had this week, which is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, I am a huge fan of the original Spider-Man game because, to me, one of the most important aspects of an open world game is how fun is it to get around the world? How does it feel? And the more fun it is to get around the world, the more that I'm wanting to explore that world. And nobody, not even Nintendo, not even Breath of the Wild, nails that feeling of just great movement like the Spider-Man games. Swinging around the city feels so good. Like, there is literally no time at all in one of these games where I would want to fast travel. Because I want to just explore. I want to have fun. I want to swing around and feel like freaking Spider-Man. And that's what you get with these games. Now, Spider-Man Miles Morales, this is more of it's almost very expansion-like to the original Spider-Man game, where obviously you're playing as Miles Morales, which means you have different abilities, but it is the same city. And you have a lot of the same sorts of challenges, you have even a lot of the same animations that you see. And so it doesn't really feel like its own wholesale experience, but it is still, it tells a good story, tells a fun story. Even though let's admit it, this Miles is not as charming and great as, say, the Into the Spider-Verse Miles. And he's not even as good as the Peter Parker in the PlayStation 4 title. So I was a little bit disappointed by the character of Miles Morales himself, because I see Miles Morales be just this dynamic, fun character that you feel is actually a teenager, instead of looking like somebody who'd be playing a teenager on TV, but is really, 30 years old. Because that is really the vibe that I got every time that you see Miles without his costume on. Is like, that guy's not 16. No, not at all. But, that aside, this story is a lot of fun. It has some twists and turns along the way. But, once again, what I'm there for is the gameplay. And the game feels so good. You get so many of those open world things that I also love, where, I love checklists. Which is weird, since, Breath of the Wild is my favorite game of all time, and that is the anti-checklist game. But here you have checklists. You have all of your little side missions. And I'm the type of guy where as soon as side missions are available, I'll go, I will do all of those side missions, and then I'll get back to the main story. And it actually kind of drives my son crazy, my son Dax, because he's the exact opposite. And so, he was bragging to me, "Dad, I already beat it. I already beat Miles Morales." And then, a couple days later, I'm like, "Yeah, well, guess what? I beat it 100%. He's like, "How did you do that?" It's my OCD. It works to my advantage. But Miles Morales is every bit as good as the original Spider-Man game is. It's not as long either, which, as we discussed when I just barely talked about Astro's Playroom, can actually be a very positive thing. And here, once again, it is a positive thing. It's having that shorter length game gives you a lot of room to kind of experience things, but also be done right away. And I will say, it's interesting because the Miles Morales and Astro's Playroom are two games that I beat 100%. I platinumed both of these games, which is something that I don't normally do, but because they were so much smaller, I was able to go in, experience that, and within a week have platinums on both of these games, and they were both amazing, delightful experiences that I can't recommend highly enough. Alright, now let's go ahead, let's get into movies a little bit. Because obviously, I've been watching a lot of movies. And normally I don't have this much content for the Geeky Weekly Wrap Up, but I've just been devouring all of these movies that I've been wanting to see for a while, and now that they're available digitally, I'm like, okay, I finally have the opportunity to watch this. So let's talk about it. And the first movie that I want to bring up is probably my least controversial take, which is The Lost City. So here's the thing. I like Sandra Bullock. Like, 90s Sandra Bullock is just peak comedy. Like, she was a comedian that you can't help but just love. She's so affable, she's so lovable. And then she started to get into more serious roles, or you get into things where, like The Blind Side. And you could see that that's kind of the direction that she was taking her career, where she's like, no, you know what, I want to be taken seriously here. And she rarely was able to have fun. And when she did, it was crap like All About Steve, which is an awful movie. But The Lost City gets back to that fun Sandra Bullock that I loved in the 90s. And yet, her character itself is actually a little bit more serious than you'd expect. But it is played off really well. And part of that is actually coming from Channing Tatum, her co-star, who, Channing Tatum is a guy that I've never really liked. I've never enjoyed him in anything that I've seen him in. It's like, yeah, I can tell that you were not an actor first because you're not a great actor. But here, his character is so just kind of the antithesis of what you'd expect from Channing Tatum, because he's a character who is not the action star. He is a model. He looks good, but he can't really do much other than work out and look good. And so, seeing that dynamic here, especially when you have him up against a very smart, very kind of down-to-earth character with Sandra Bullock, and you have this fun dynamic between the two of them. And then you have some of the other roles. Daniel Radcliffe. Give me Daniel Radcliffe as a bad guy every day of the week, because he is so good at playing just kind of smarmy and weaselly characters, and we don't get to see that very often, but here he's a great villain. And then you have little cameo appearances. Brad Pitt is hilarious in this. Which, you wouldn't expect it, but, just kind of getting down to the brass tacks of things. All in all, this movie just has that fun action feel that you don't really get much of these days. You get, of course, a lot in Marvel, but Marvel is kind of its own tier. It's doing its own thing. And here you have a completely different dynamic, but it actually ends up working out really well. I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I expected. And yeah, The Lost City, go check it out. All right, let's talk about Morbius. Gosh. Here's the thing. It's like Sony without Daddy Feige there guiding them along. They just don't know how to make a good superhero movie. And obviously, Morbius, you knew from the get-go that this was not going to be a masterpiece. You knew that, okay, well, you have Jared Leto, who is the most obnoxious, just douchebag in Hollywood, playing the main character. So obviously, you have one check against you there. You have him playing a vampire that's just kind of a minor Spider-Man villain. And yeah, why are you concentrating in on Morbius, of all people? I mean, it's not like you could, I don't know, concentrate on even more obscure villains, right? Sony, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're trying to do here. Well, I mean, I do know what you're doing. What you're doing is you're trying to build up a brand building on this Spider-Man hype of exactly where the MCU has taken Spider-Man. And you're trying to build on that, but still remain separate. Trying to be like, this is our universe. We have control of this. We get all the profits here. And, Kevin Feige, the MCU, you've given us all the elements that we need to be successful here. Except for they're not. They're just not. This plot, absolutely nonsensical. The characters, every one of them, bad. The acting, horrid. The special effects, oh my goodness. The special effects that they have for the vampire faces gives me flashbacks to Buffy and Angel in the worst ways. I mean, just check out Matt Smith as a vampire. When he has the vampire face. It's hideous. It's so bad. And then there's Jared Leto. What is this? What is this CGI nonsense? It's so bad looking. No! Don't do this! Okay. Is there fun to be had here? Yeah, of course. It's a superhero movie, so you're gonna have a little bit of fun here and there. Is it really worth your time? Maybe more so than the Northman. Controversy. I know I'm going to really upset a lot of people. Because I think The Northman is objectively an awful movie. And anyone that you have out there that are the type that would call, say, movies cinema. You know, any of those hoity-toity movie critic types. You know, this is a movie for them, I guess, because it certainly is not a movie for me. And that is The Northman. So, here's the thing. Obviously, when you see a trailer for The Northman, what you see are beautiful visuals that are shot so well, that look amazing. And you have it in this backdrop that you don't see done too well too often, of, you know, just kind of that classic Viking feel, but actually have it be, you know, historically accurate to what Vikings actually were. And, you know, get a lot of that. And yeah, that looks great. That looks great. And then you see the movie, and you realize, first of all, okay, this is just a boilerplate revenge plot. Okay, you know, that's one thing. You know, you don't need to have that creative you know, you don't need to have that creative of a plot for me to get invested in a movie. What you do have to have is a plot that is able to move itself forward in ways that actually work well, that feel right and feel natural. You don't get that here. The plot feels nonsensical every step of the way. You get absolutely no connection to any of these characters. The dialogue is so bad, and so badly acted too. Here's the thing. So every line read is in one of two tones. Either you have a very kind of low, I am speaking this way, and I am very monotone in how I am speaking, and I am going to throw in a bunch of very Norwegian sounding proper names in here so that you can tell that I'm from Fjoristen. And then you have the screaming in just war rage. And those are the only dynamics to the entire film. Everything is either low and monotone or screaming. That is it. And it does not work. It does not sound good. It does not feel good. You have no attachment to any of these characters. You do not care about the plight of this guy. I can't even remember his name because he was that bad. Because there's just nothing there to grab onto. Oh man, and it's boring. It is so dreadfully boring. And it feels like nothing happens in 90% of the scenes, but it feels like nothing happens except for what feels like kind of baby's first art film. And what I mean by that is, oh, you have to look at the deeper meanings here. Because really, when the main character, you know, decides to not have sex with his wife on his first day back and instead go and act like a dog in a cave with his son, that means, you know, is very metaphorical for life in general and the priorities that he might have had. No, it's just bad, and it feels bad. You look at shots of this movie and you wonder, why is that there? You know, other than to be pretentious. You know, you take the, you know, going back to the acting like a dog scene. Hey, and then his son sticks his hand into his father's wound and for some reason gets this trippy scene with corpses, with a tree with corpses hanging on it, and it's weird, but not weird in a good way. You know me, I like weird. I love weird. But I love weird that actually has a point to it, and there is no point behind any of the weird here. And then you have these wonderful actors. You have Willem Dafoe. You have Ethan Hawke. These great actors that you expect so much from, but they are given so little to work with here. And what they are given is bad. It's badly written dialogue that makes no sense. It's delivered in awful ways with awful direction. I hated this movie. I hated it. I expected to love it, and I hated it. Makes me sad. But you know what I did not hate? It's Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Oh my goodness. So here's the thing, I love Lonely Island. And so knowing that the Lonely Island guys were the ones behind this movie was already kind of something that I knew I would enjoy. I loved the original Rescue Rangers. That was my childhood. The Disney afternoon shows, those had such a special place in my heart. So of course the ingredients were there. And then as I remember seeing those first trailers for this and thinking, what? What exactly is this thing? And, I love every second of this film. It's funny, it's poignant, it does meta in the way that Space Jam 2 wishes it could have done. But it does it without being too into itself, too much of kind of that Ready Player One, hey, you remember this? Hey, you remember this? Hey, you remember this? No, here, it does get in a lot of those references, and some of them may feel throwaway. But when they're throwaway, they literally are just throwaway, because there'll be a character in the background, and you go, hey, he's there. But then you get deeper into things with a lot of these references that work out really, really well. I mean, obviously the internet's going crazy about Ugly Sonic, but there's a reason, because you take Ugly Sonic and you take what he means to internet culture and how the internet was able to get a studio to cave into their demands to fix really, really bad CGI. And then you make him a character in this movie, in a Chip and Dale movie, and you suddenly take just this kind of throwaway character and throwaway line into a more meta commentary on, what is internet culture, how is it that corporations and consumers really work with each other, and it works out very well. But let me back up a little bit, because if you don't know much about this show and you're a little bit confused here, it's because Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, the new movie on Disney Plus, is a reboot of Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, but it does a reboot in a very clever way. Because instead of just being, a continuation of the adventures of Chip and Dale and Monterey Jack and Gadget and Zipper, instead of it really just being the same thing, it subverts expectations by making it so that Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers was a show in this universe. And these characters were actors in the show. And then you're able to take it and you're able to Roger Rabbitify it, where you have cartoons are real people and they live normal lives, and so you get a lot of that sort of fun effect here. And then you do have this mystery that comes up where Chip and Dale have to get back together, and obviously when the show Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers ended, they ended on kind of bad blood with each other, but obviously they were best friends once, and so it's really a story about them coming back together and reigniting that friendship. And it has such heart to it. And it's funny. I laughed so many times during this movie. Yes, at a lot of the meta humor, at a lot of the references, but also just at a lot of the clever dialogue and a lot of places that they take the story that you would not expect them to take the story. And, you know, I reflected a lot on this because obviously Space Jam: A New Legacy came out. And Space Jam: A New Legacy was trying to go after a lot of the same sort of thing of just being meta humor and of being, okay, well, let's really explore what it is to, you know, own a property. Let's take a step back and look at something holistically. And here's the difference. With Space Jam: A New Legacy, you had it built in a boardroom. You had it being built as basically an advertisement for Warner Brothers properties. And then you have Chippendales Rescue Rangers, which you can tell was built by very passionate people who have a respect and a love for all these properties that they're using. But more than that, they have heart. And that is what was missing from Space Jam. And you get that here in spades. It feels great. Now, what I will say is, obviously, you compare it to Space Jam, and there's no comparison here. Chippendales Rescue Rangers is far and away the better movie. But then, you take the last movie to do this same sort of thing extremely successfully, and that would have been Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Compared to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you find a lot of parallels. You know, you do have a mystery. You do have these cartoons living alongside people, and you do have a lot of references. You have studios kind of working together and mixing properties that you wouldn't expect to be mixed. And so you have a lot of those same elements. And do I think that this is as good as Roger Rabbit? Not quite. Not quite. And honestly, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is probably my top 10 movies of all time. I adore that film. And the fact that I can even say in the same sentence that Chippendale Rescue Rangers is almost there is saying a lot. This movie is great. And it amazes me that this was not released in theaters because it is every bit as good of a kids movie as has been released in theaters in the last 10 years. And here we have it, just day one on Disney Plus. And you need to watch this movie. You know, even if you have absolutely no affinity towards Chippendale Rescue Rangers, even if you don't think that a lot of the meta humor is going to get you, trust me, there's going to be something in here for you. Heck, there's a Batman vs. E.T. movie in this movie. Batman vs. E.T. So even if you don't expect, you know, I'm not one of those, you know, Disney Afternoon, early 90s, late 80s kids, you know, none of this humor is going to hit for me. There's going to be something there for you. And it's going to be lovingly crafted, and you will get a kick out of it. This movie is well worth your time. Go and watch it on Disney Plus. And that is it for this week. I know that I went into a lot of shows. I went into a lot more than I normally do. And I know that I had some controversial takes in there. I know very specifically some friends that are going to take umbrage with some of my comments about the Northman specifically. But I have to call it like I see it. Northman bad, Chippendale amazing. Review!